Hashem, today's daf is Menachos Ayin Dal and Menachos 74. We're going to start in the bottom of Ayin Gimel Amabeis, where the Gemara discusses the idea of what do you do with the minchas chote of the Kohanim. Now, generally speaking, a mincha of a Kohen is never eaten. But the question is, did they have to take, if they brought a obligatory sin offering, did the Kohen first have to take a kmitza and then burn the kmitza and then burn the rest of the mincha separately? So the Rabbanan say, no, burn it all at once. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, first take a kmitza and burn that and then burn the shirayim. So what's the source? Rabbi Shimon's halacha, starting on 73b, 10 lines from the bottom at the two dots, Minane Mili. What's the source? The Tan Rabbanan. It's based on the fact that the pasuk says about the mincha of the choteh. V'aisela kohen kimincha. It will be for the kohen like a mincha. What does that mean? Shetei avodas aksherabo. So the Brisa says that this means he's capable of doing the avodah. That the kohen can do the mincha. If he did his own sin, he could do his own avodah. Atomer shetei avodas aksherabo. Does that mean that it's kosher on him? Oh. Or maybe it's to allow him to eat it. Maybe it's to allow him to eat this minchas chota, to eat the shirayim. What about the pasuk that says every mincha of the kohen should be burned? That's minchas nidvaso. That's a voluntary mincha of his that cannot be eaten. Of a chavaso, but if it's his obligatory mincha, that he could eat it. So I might have thought that time. It says will be for the kohen like a mincha. Makesh chavaso and nidvaso. Compares his obligatory mincha to his voluntary. Man nidvaso ain't a nechel. It's just like his voluntary ones are not eaten. Af chavaso ain't a nechel. Also, his obligatory minchos are not eaten. Amar Rabbi Shimon v'chinemar v'aisal kohen kaminchaso. It doesn't say it'll be the kohen like his mincha. That's not what the pasuk says. Says Rabbi Shimon. Well, never el kamincha will be like a mincha. El lahakish, so it's to compare minchas chotesh hakohanim. We're top of Ayin Down Amud Aleph to compare the minchas choteh of the kohanim to minchas choteh shel Yisrael. To compare the minchas choteh of the kohanim to minchas choteh of a Yisrael. Ma minchas choteh shel Yisrael. Nikmat says just like the mincha of a Jew who sinned. There's first the kmitza of minchas chotesh hakohanim nikmatis. So the minchas choteh of the kohanim is first nikmatis. I might think you're also supposed to eat the minchas choteh. I might think that the kohen should eat the shirayim. La kohen for a mincha, it's like a kohen for the mincha. But the fire is not like an altar, meaning to say that he doesn't get to eat it. It's not like the minchas choteh because this is certainly burnt. So it's like a mincha in that he does the kmitza, but it's not like the minchas choteh because this one is all burnt in the minchas choteh, the shirayim are eaten. So now the Gemara says, "Haketz ad komets karvatz." No, the shirayim kremen masra. The kmitza is brought by itself, and the shirayim are brought for itself. Then the Gemara says, according to the Rabbanan who say that this pasuk teaches us that the Kohen could do the avoda on the minchas that he could do his own avoda if he's in. Is this the source for it according to the Rabbanan? Didn't we learn that from there? How do you know that a Kohen can bring his korban whenever moment he wants? Tam Omer ubabekol avat nafsho b'shireis. He could. It says the pasuk in Rei. He could come whenever he wants and serve. Babekol avat nafsho al makom asher yivchar Hashem lokem v'shireis, and he could serve there. So what does that pasuk mean? That pasuk is coming to tell us. Hold on. So what does that pasuk come to teach us? that he can do this service. The Gemara says no. He may ask him if that was the source. I might have thought that's something that's not coming for a sin. But carbon for a sin, I might have thought he can't do it. The Gemara says, that's is also not the source for that. There's a different source from that. It says, it says the Kohen will achieve atonement for their soul that sinned accidentally. And it teaches us the Kohen can do his kapara for himself. The Gemara says, no, that also is not the source. I might have thought that it only works b'shogeg, but not intentionally. Even though a chatas is almost always only brought for a shogeg, there are some examples. The Gemara is going to say, b'mezid, that he could do b'mezid. How do you ever have such a case where the Kohen has to bring a minchas chote for an intentional sin? So the Gemara says, b'zadon shvua, where he intentionally swore falsely, and then this case was where he intentionally swore falsely, that he doesn't know testimony, and then he discovered he was lying. And then we're going to, under those circumstances, even b'mezid, he's obligated to bring a carbon chatas. But in this case, it could also be a minchas chota, which only applies by the dalei dalas if a person is very poor. So now we say if he's wealthy, he brings the bird. If wealthy, or brings the animal. Tanya Idach, Rabbi Shimon Omer, minchas chota shel kohanim. Another brayse that teaches us, Rabbi Shimon taught the same thing. The minchas chota the kohanim nekmetzes v'kometz karva b'fnei atmo v'shiraim b'fnei atmo. The kometz brought by itself, and the shiraim is also brought. Rabbi Lezer bar Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, argues, and he says, "Hakometz karva atmo v'shiraim mispazron al beis hadeshen." He says the kometz is brought, but the ashes are scattered over the beis hadeshen. What is that? I'm Rabbi Chibar Havi Bei Rabbi Yochanan Beis Hadeshen Nehecha. Where are they scattering these ashes? Where is this place called the place of the Deshen? Our parsha is talking about the Trumas Hadeshen, the removal of the ashes. So where is this? Idu Amal, if we're talking about on the Mizbeach itself, Hainu Avua. This is what his father taught. Idu Amata, if it's below the altar, next to the altar, where the removal of the ashes from our parsha goes. Idu Amata, Yeshcha Davar Shekar V'Amata. Is there anything else in the world which is brought as an offering below, not on the altar, but next to the altar? And what Rabbi Abba Dilma Ibud, maybe he's bringing it just to be destroyed. He's not bringing it as an offering, but rather he's bringing it that'll be destroyed. Is there so? They laughed at him when he made this suggestion. When Rabbi Abba, hold on 1 second. When Rabbi Abba gave this suggestion that it's going to be brought, they laughed at him. Is there anything else that's brought just in order to be destroyed? Well, isn't everything that's brought to be destroyed? That's why you'd burn it, but I guess that's not the question. That's not the scenario exactly. So the Gemara says, Tani Avua de Rabbi Avin, Kol Minchas Kohen Kalil Tiyah, Lo Teachel. So it says in the pasuk, every Minchas Kohen should be burnt, you shall not eat it. Lachila hi kashtia lo davar acher. So he says it's compared to eating and not for anything else. My kamar, what's he saying? So Amar Baya Kamar, this is what Avud Rabbi Avin was teaching in this brisa. What he was teaching is every minchas kohen. Now the pasuk says kol minchas kohen koil tiyah lo tiachel, but he switches it around. Says Abaye, it means kol minchas kohen should not be eaten if it's a chova, and koil chova. So when koil tiyah nidvaso, but his entire, so both if it's a chova it's burnt, and then if it's a chova there's a lav against eating it, and otherwise. If it's in the dava, kalil tiyeh, lo tiachel. If it is Kol minchas kohen lo teachel. That if it's a chova, there's a lav. Kalil tiyeh, and should be entirely burnt if it's in a dava. So Amalei Rava, stakina charifa mivsaka cry. You're chopping up the verse and putting it out of order. Ela marava kol minchas kohen kalil tiyeh. Every mincha of a kohen should be entirely burned. That refers to nidva, so it's voluntary reference. Lo teachel, that there's a lav, it's prohibition, you're not allowed to eat it, that's chova. So that's if it's obligatory. The epoch ana and Epochana. So why don't you read it the opposite way? Why don't you read it like Abaye? So, or why don't the Yibitru? Why doesn't Rava read it like Abaye? The Epochana. So the Gemara says, really, it's a question of both Abaye and Rava. You could both read it in either direction. So why are you reading it like this? This is okay. So the Gemara answers, Mistaber nitvasau havle rabuye. It's more logical to assume that the voluntary mincha is the one that we should include, shekain tadira, because it's more common. And also, it's like it's more common to assume that the voluntary mincha is the one that should be burnt, because we're going to learn it out that it's burnt like the minchas chavitin, because it's similar to a shekain tadira, because they're both brought every day. You can make a voluntary offering every day, but the minchas chov of the chota you can't bring every day. And also the lochate, the minchas nedava doesn't come for a sin, and also neither does the minchas chavitin. And also bas and reche, also they both provide. It has sweet smell because they have oil and frankincense. Adrabah Gemara says just the opposite. Chovaso the pasuk should be teaching us about the minchas chova, that's the one should be burnt like the minchas chavitin. Shekain isaron, that they're both come from an asira sa'efa and not more. But the minchas nedava you could bring even from 60 asronim, and also chova, and they're both obligatory. And so the Gemara says no hanach nafishin. The other one is more shekain tadira, lochati, and basim recha. So now the Gemara says, the Rabbanon, Hai Kol Minchas Kohen Kalil Tiyeh Lo Teachel Mayan. According to the Rabbanon, who say it's entirely burnt and it's not two separate kamitz and a shrine. What do they do with this pasuk? Kol Minchas Kohen Kalil Tiyeh Lo Teachel Mayan. When we Balu the Tanya, Eli El Yona Be Kalil Taktar V'Tachtona Below Teachel. I might think that only the previous paragraph, Ayi Chavitin, is supposed to be burned, and the tachtona, the regular, the tachtona, which in this case is the other menachos, are in the prohibition below teachel. I might think that the regular minchas chavitin is what has to be burnt, and the other menachos of the kohen there's a law against eating. How do I know that they both have the law and they both have the kiyam that say to burn it? Tamalomar kalil kalil. It says twice kalil. Xer shava. Nemar kan. It says by the minchas of the kohen kalil. Nemar lawan. It says by the minchas chavitin kalil. So we have to say malalam kalil taktar. Avkam kalil taktar. In both cases, it's entirely burnt. Malkan. We take lo sasei achilas. So afalom we take lo sasei achilas. So in both cases, there is a law. So now the Gemara says by Ravina kohen she'achal minai murin. Now, what is the kohen who ate from the parts, the kidneys, the liver, the kohen ate a little bit of the liver? They're supposed to go on the altar. So, what would be the halacha with respect to him? Meaning, what is he in violation of? Mahu lav dezaros. There's a prohibition in Torah that falls out yochal kodesh. Well, kami bali. That we're not asking about. It says Ravina. He kami bali on the top of Ayin Damar days. I'm only asking about lav de koil. Yeah, that it's supposed to be the prohibition of that it's supposed to be entirely burned. Amarav Aaron Ravina, so Rav Aaron says, so he says, Says Rav Aaron Travina Tashma, the time Rabbi Elazar Omar Kolshu B'Kolil Tiyah. So anything that is supposed to be burned, any carbon that's supposed to be entirely burnt, is going to be in violation of a Lutza, say if you eat it. Minchas Kohanim, says the Mishnah. Minchas Kohanim Mashiach. Minchas Nesachim. Or the Minchas Kohanim, the Kohen Mashiach, and the Nesachim Mizbeach, they go on the altar. Ve'ein ba'en Kohanim. The Kohanim get no parts of them. And this is how the Mizbeach is greater than the Kohanim, because they get those entire parts, the Mincha of the Kohanim, the Minchas Kohanim Mashiach, and the Minchas Nesachim. Shtei Alechem, Lechem Apanim, and 2 loaves of bread and the lechem apanim on Shavuos ne'acholin lekohanim. That's it. 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos and the lechem apanim every Shabbos ne'acholin lekohanim. Then was already eaten by the kohanim. The aim by emblem is beach, and nothing from them goes to the altar. Bazeh yafa koach kohanim mikoachim is beach. That's how the kohanim have more power than the altar. If the shtei lechem and the lechem apanim are only to the kohanim. So the Gemara says, these are the only cases that are entirely burnt. Vayika Ola. Vayika Ola. What about the Ola that's entirely burnt? The Gemara says, Ika Ola Kohanim. The Kohanim get the skin. Vayika Ola Sa'of. What about the Ola Sa'of? That is entirely burnt. Ika Murav and notes. I know there's the crop and the feathers which are tossed away. Vayika Nisachim. What about the Murah? I think it might be the gizzard. Okay, it's one of the digestive elements of the bird. Vayika Oasaov. What about the Oasaov? Ika Morvanos. Vayika Nesachim. What about the Nesachim that accompany the animals? The wine that comes with the Minchas Nesachim, that is entirely on the altar, and there's no portion to the Kohanim. And why did Tana not teach that? So the Gemara says, L'shitin azli. No, because those are poured down the 2 holes. There were the wine was put in a silver jug, and there was a hole that the wine was poured into towards on the top of the altar, and there by 2 cavities, it would go down to a space that was under the altar. And so it was cleaned out. The Gemara also tells us cleaned out every 70 years. Umay bazu, and why does it say at the end of this discussion in the Mishnah, bazu yafekoach mizbeach mikoach hakwan? Why does it have to use that phrase? We know it already. So afukim in the Shmuel to exclude the position of Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel hamesnadev yayin nevio mizofel. Shmuel says that you can't bring wine. If you made a voluntary donation of wine, you bring it and you pour it on the altar to like perfume al gabe ishim. So kamash malan. That's Shmuel's position. So to say that Shmuel is not correct, so to tell us that the Lashita Nazli, that the wine is not going to be poured directly on the altar. Our Mishnah is telling us, no, you don't pour the wine on the fire, because only those things in the Mishnah are listed. And so the wine is poured into the Shitin if you make a carbon of wine. So then the Gemara says, we have a support for this. Shmuel says if you make a donation of oil, you do the kamitza, and the shirayim of the oil is eaten, which teaches us that. So and by shemen it has a portion on the altar, and so that's like the words of the Tana, who said that only by those things in the Mishnah is yafekoach hamezbach. And there's no portion to the Kohanim, because we see by the oil that it's not entirely burnt. Under those circumstances, the portion goes to the Kohanim to eat. So we see from this other one, Zvachim, that Shmuel says that the oil is not entirely burnt, and that's consistent with our Mishnah. So by wine, Shmuel is apparently inconsistent with our Mishnah. By oil, he is consistent with our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Shtei lechem v'lechem aponim, the 2 loaves of bread and the lechem aponim are eaten by the Kohanim. V'su'eka, that is the only things that are entirely eaten by the Kohanim. V'ika chatasof. What about the chatasof? The bird offering of a sinner. So ika dama, no, that has blood that's sprinkled on the applied to the altar. Ika uk shemen shamatzor, about the oil of a mitzvah, which is drunk only by the Kohen, doesn't go on the altar. Ika masnosam, no, it's applied to his. There's some parts of it that are applied to the human being. They're applied to his ear, his thumb, and his big toe. His right ear, thumb, and big toe. My bazu, and what's bazu coming to exclude? Afukim manda amar shnei lachem abos b'fnei atzman v'streifa asyan. So there is a position that says if two loaves of bread are brought without the animal, they're supposed to be burned. Kamash one, no, they're not burnt. That they're eaten by the Kohen and they're not burnt. So we see from here the bazu yafikoch kohanim olam, that even under these circumstances, without the sheep, that the kohanim could eat them and they are not supposed to be burnt. Okay, next Mishnah. Kol menachos hanasos b'kli. All the menachos that are placed into utensil to unos shematanos, they require 3 applications of oil, and the Mishnah lists them in the reverse order: yitziko, blila, umata, and shemen b'kli. Kodem asiyasan. So there's the pouring, the mixing, and the application into the utensil before you make it. So it's reverse. Obviously, it's first it's going to be the application to the kli, then the mixing, and afterwards is the pouring. Chalos bowl, and the chalos you mix with oil, divrei Rebbe, meaning after they're already baked. Chamim omrim soas chalos tunas blila. The flour of the chalos require mixing with oil. Urikikin, the thinner wavers, we saw the 2 explanations. Is it the thin or does it relate to whether or not the pot is covered? The rikikin mishicha and the rikikin require anointing. Keitzan moshchan kamin kai v'ashar nechal l'kohanim. You anoint the rikikin with and it looks like kai, Greek letter kai, and then the rest are in the kohanim. So the Gemara says, what's this coming to exclude? What do you mean that the mincha, which mincha is Tana excluding that it only requires 3 applications? Means say only those menachos that are in the utensil require 3 applications. So what's it coming to exclude? But the mincha that's baked in an oven, and so therefore it's not entirely made in the utensil, and it doesn't require 3 applications, only 2, because meaning to say it doesn't have a mitzvah of yitzika, pouring the oil on it after the blila. Okay, we'll stop here, Baruch Hashem, and pick this up. Yeshua.